All right, so we're here at the drawing board and we're talking about the immune system. All right, and the immune system really has three responsibilities. Number one, it's gonna have to be able to first recognize that there is a problem. So it could be an infection, it could be an autoimmune, well, different problems arise with recognition because sometimes the body thinks that self is actually a problem when actually self is self. So it needs to appropriately recognize that there is a problem and be correct in its assessment that there is a problem. So that's the first step or feature of the immune system. And the second one is that it needs to respond appropriately. So first it has to recognize that something is wrong, and then it has to mount the appropriate response to what it has perceived is wrong. So it could be a virus, for example, it could be a bacterial infection, it could be trauma, or something that's bleeding, like an injury, and so it has to respond to that trauma appropriately. And then finally, the third thing that it needs to be able to do is to recover. So having appropriately recognized that there is a problem, responded appropriately, it now needs to clean up all of the damage from the various things that it has done to neutralize the threat or to heal the problem or to reduce the inflammation. It now becomes a problem if it's unable to recover from what it has done. So imagine some tanks that are attacking a city and they've gone and burnt up the entire city, they've bombed it, and now the only thing that they have left to do is to clean up all of the rubble and rebuild the city, but then they don't. What happens is that you have total problems happening because all of this junk is left and it's not properly cleaned up. So to help you to understand how it achieves this, the first thing that we need to do is to recognize that the immune system, let me change this paper here, the immune system essentially has two parts. So we have the immune system, and it's divided into two parts. This part is known as a circulatory immune system, and the other part is what I call the stationary immune system. So the circulatory part is what we've been hearing so much about, which is the white blood cells, the antibodies and all of that kind of thing. And therefore, this is what we've been focusing on. But there's also the immune system that is stationary. And to illustrate this, I'm going to bring our good friend Tom into the picture. All right, so let's get this guy out of here. Let's bring in Tom. Now Tom, naturally, like all of us, will have a circulatory immune system with all the different white blood cells floating through the bloodstream throughout his body. But he's also going to have something called a reticular endothelial system. And that reticular endothelial system is going to consist of a few organs. Number one, it's going to be the liver right here. It's going to be the spleen right here. And throughout the body, there's these little guys that we call lymph nodes. They're scattered all throughout. Just put in a few here. And so these areas are essentially processing parts, processing plants, so that when the immune system has recognized that there's a threat, it has responded to that threat appropriately. Now both the threat and the immune cells will now have to pass through these various areas where the blood flow or the lymph flow is going to slow down a bit. And because it has slowed down, it's going to give the system time to process, respond appropriately, and also to clean up the waste products from all of the damage that has been caused. And so we have all of these organs here that don't just sit there, but they help us to process a lot of the waste and also help with training the immune system to respond appropriately. So we come back to our original issue here. Remember, we said that the immune system is supposed to recognize, respond, and recover. And in many people, there are problems with this whole process. So there is what we call immune dysregulation. Because that is the case, there can be problems with recognition. We mentioned autoimmune diseases before, so there can be problems with recognizing what is self and what is not self. And so we're going to talk about the fact that autoimmune illnesses are one of the main ways that we find a problem with recognition. The next is going to be response. So sometimes in people who have a low immune system, people who are what we call immunocompromised, they may not be able to respond appropriately when there is a threat. And so that could either be the case, or what we saw most commonly happening with our recent problem with our crisis, and I'm going to call the name, is that we also had people who were struggling because they had an over-exaggerated response. So you can have an under response, or an inappropriate response, inadequate response, or you can have an over-exaggerated response. And this is where we're seeing a lot of people developing clots, organ failure in response to the virus that they were exposed to. And then finally, is a problem that I think we're gonna now start facing quite a lot more, is that there are quite a few people who have been exposed either to the virus or in some cases to a vaccine. And it has caused whatever immune response it needs to, but then a lot of people are having problems with the recovery. And this is where we start hearing about things called long haul syndrome and that kind of thing, where yes, the response has been appropriate, but there has been no cleanup. And so there's residual inflammatory proteins and debris from all of the work that was done. So the question to tidy up this video now is, what unites all of these things? So the immune system consists of so many different moving parts and stationary parts. And the question becomes, who or what is coordinating all of these efforts to make sure that recognition takes place at the right time and stops at the right time, response takes place at the right time and stops at the right time, and finally coordinating the recovery process. So if you think you know what the answer is for that final stage, what is coordinating everything, then I want you to leave it in the comments below. If you don't know the answer, don't worry about it, because there's going to be a video coming up soon that will tell you exactly what the answer is. It's a spoiler. It has the initials are ANS. That's a spoiler there. So if you can figure out what that means, you'll be able to figure out what the title of the next video is going to be. And I want to advise you to like, subscribe, and share. Keep following